Drama, drama, drama. That's what's happening in a teen girl's life and a teen girl's brain. Mom, I so totally can't go to school. I just found out Brian likes me and I have a huge zit and no concealer. OMG, how can you even think I'll go? Homework? I told you I'm not doing any more until you promise to send me away to school. I can't stand living with you for one more minute. No, I'm not done talking to Eve. It has not been 2 hours and I'm not getting off the phone. This is what you get if you have the modern version of the teen girl brain living in your house. The teenage years are a turbulent time. The teen girl's brain is sprouting, reorganizing, and pruning neuronal circuits that drive the way she thinks, feels, and acts, and obsesses over her looks. Her brain is unfolding ancient instructions on how to be a woman. During puberty, a girl's entire biological race in Detra is to become sexually desirable. She begins judging herself against her peers and media images of other attractive females. This brain state is created by the surge of new hormones on top of the ancient female genetic blueprint. Attracting male attention is a newfound and exciting form of self-expression for my friend Shelley's teenage daughters, and the high-octane estrogen coursing through their brain pathways fuels their obsession. The hormones that affect their responsivity to social stress are going sky high, which is where they get their off-the-wall ideas and clothing choices, and why they are constantly staring at themselves in the mirror. They are almost exclusively interested in their appearance, specifically whether the boys who populate their real and fantasy worlds will find them attractive. Thank goodness, says Shelley, they have 3 bathrooms in their home because her girls spend hours in front of the mirror, inspecting pores, plucking eyebrows, wishing the butts they see would shrink. Their breasts grow larger and waists get smaller, all to attract boys. Girls would likely be doing some version of this whether the media were there to influence their self-image or not. Hormones would be driving their brains to develop these impulses even if they didn't see skinny actresses and models on the cover of every magazine. They would be obsessing over whether or not boys thought they looked good, because their hormones create the reality in their brains that being attractive to boys is the most important thing. Their brains are hard at work rewiring themselves, and this is why conflicts will increase and become more intense as teen girls struggle for independence and identity. Who are they anyway? They are developing the parts of themselves that most make them women, their strength for communicating, forming social bonds, and nurturing those around them. If parents understand the biological changes happening in the teen girl brain circuits, they can support their daughters' self-esteem and well-being during these rocky years. Riding the estrogen-progesterone waves. The smooth sailing of girlhood is over. Now parents find themselves walking on eggshells around a moody, temperamental, and resistant child. All of this drama is because the girlhood or juvenile pause has ended, and their daughter's pituitary gland has sprung to life as the chemical brakes are taken off her pulsing hypothalamic cells, which have been held in check since toddlerhood. This cellular release sparks the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian system into action. It is the first time since infantile puberty that their daughter's brain will be marinated in high levels of estrogen. In fact, it is the first time that her brain will experience estrogen-progesterone surges that come in repeated monthly waves from her ovaries. These surges will vary day to day and week to week. The rising tide of estrogen and progesterone starts to fuel many circuits in the teen girl's brain that were laid down in fetal life. These new hormonal surges assure that all of her female-specific brain circuits will become even more sensitive to emotional nuance, such as approval and disapproval, acceptance and rejection. And as her body blossoms, she may not know how to interpret the newfound sexual attention. Are those stares of approval or disapproval? Are her breasts the right ones or the wrong ones? On some days, her self-confidence is strong, and on other days, it hangs by a precarious thread. As a child, she was able to hear a wider spectrum of emotional tone in another's voice than a boy could. Now that difference becomes even greater. The filter through which she feels the feedback of others also depends on where she is in her cycle. Some days the feedback will reinforce her self-confidence, and other days it will destroy her. You can tell her one day that her jeans are cut a bit low and she'll ignore you. But catch her on the wrong day of her cycle, and what she hears is that you're calling her a slut or telling her she's too fat to wear those jeans. Even if you didn't say or intend this, it's how her brain interprets your comment. We know that many parts of the female brain, including an important seat of memory and learning, the hippocampus, the main center for control of the body's organs, the hypothalamus, and the master center of emotions, the amygdala, are particularly affected by this new estrogen and progesterone fuel. It sharpens critical thinking and fine-tunes emotional responsivity. These enhanced brain circuits will stabilize into their adult shape by late puberty and into early adulthood. At the same time, we now know that the estrogen and progesterone surges start making the adolescent female brain, especially the hippocampus, experience weekly changes in sensitivity to stress that will continue until she passes through menopause. Researchers at the Pittsburgh Psychobiologic Studies Center studied normal 7 to 16-year-olds as they progressed through puberty, testing their stress responsivity and their daily levels of cortisol. The girls showed more intense responses, while boys' stress responsiveness dropped. Females' bodies and brains react to stress differently than do males once they have entered puberty. Fluctuating estrogen and progesterone in the brain is responsible for this opposite stress responsivity in the hippocampus of females. Males and females become reactive to different kinds of stress. Girls begin to react more to relationship stresses and boys to challenges to their authority. Relationship conflict is what drives a teen girl's stress system wild. She needs to be liked and socially connected. A teen boy needs to be respected and higher in the male pecking order. The girl's brain circuits are arranged and fueled by estrogen to respond to stress with nurturant activities and the creation of protective social networks. She hates relationship conflict. Her brain's stress response is massively triggered by social rejection. The ebb and flow of estrogen during the menstrual cycle changes this sensitivity to psychological and social stress on a weekly basis. The first 2 weeks of the cycle, when estrogen is high, a girl is more likely to be socially interested and relaxed with others. In the last 2 weeks of the cycle, when progesterone is high and estrogen is lower, she is more likely to react with increased irritability and will want to be left alone. Estrogen and progesterone reset the brain's stress response each month. A girl's self-confidence may be high 1 week, but on thin ice the next. During the juvenile pause of childhood, when estrogen levels are stable and low, a girl's stress system is calmer and more constant. Once estrogen and progesterone levels climb at puberty, her responsivity to both stress and pain start to rise, all marked by new reactions in the brain to the stress hormone cortisol. She's easily stressed, high-strung, and she starts looking for ways to chill out.
The image is a line graph illustrating hormone level changes during the human menstrual cycle. It depicts the fluctuations in estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone androgen levels throughout the cycle's estrogen and progesterone phases. Estrogen levels are comparatively higher during the initial phase, correlating with heightened verbal intimacy and sex drive, while progesterone levels rise during the latter phase. Testosterone androgen levels remain relatively stable. The graph suggests a cyclical interplay between these hormones, influencing various physiological and psychological aspects of the female experience.
So how does she calm down? I was teaching a class of 15-year-olds about brain differences between males and females, and I asked the boys and girls to come up with some questions that they'd always wanted to ask each other. The boys asked, "Why do girls go to the bathroom together?" They assumed that the answer would involve something sexual, but the girls replied, "It's the only private place at school we can go to talk." Needless to say, the boys couldn't ever imagine saying to another guy, "Hey, want to go to the bathroom together?" That scene captures a pivotal brain difference between males and females. As we saw in Chapter 1, the circuits for social and verbal connection are more naturally hardwired in the typical female brain than in the typical male. It is during the teen years that the flood of estrogen in girls' brains will activate oxytocin and sex-specific female brain circuits, especially those for talking, flirting, and socializing. Those high school girls hanging out in the bathroom are cementing their most important relationships with other girls. Many women find biological comfort in one another's company, and language is the glue that connects one female to another. No surprise, then, that some verbal areas of the brain are larger in women than in men, and that women, on average, talk and listen a lot more than men. The numbers vary, but on average, girls speak 2 to 3 times more words per day than boys. We know that young girls speak earlier, and by the age of 20 months, have double or triple the number of words in their vocabularies than do boys. Boys eventually catch up in their vocabulary, but not in speed or overlapping speech. Girls speak faster on average, especially when they are in a social setting. Men haven't always appreciated that verbal edge. In colonial America, women were put in the town stocks with wooden clips on their tongues or tortured by the dunking stool, held underwater and almost drowned, punishments that were never imposed on men for the crime of talking too much. Even among our primate cousins, there's a big difference in the vocal communication of males and females. Female rhesus monkeys, for instance, learn to vocalize much earlier than do males and use every one of the 17 vocal tones of their species all day long, every day, to communicate with one another. Male rhesus monkeys, by contrast, learn only 3 to 6 tones, and once they're adults, they'll go for days or even weeks without vocalizing at all. Sound familiar? And why do girls go to the bathroom to talk? Why do they spend so much time on the phone with the door closed? They're trading secrets and gossiping to create connection and intimacy with their female peers. They're developing close-knit cliques with secret rules. In these new groups, talking, telling secrets, and gossiping, in fact, often become girls' favorite activities. They're tools to navigate and ease the ups and downs and stresses of life. I could see it in Shauna's face. Her mother was complaining that she couldn't get her 15-year-old to concentrate on work or even a conversation about school. Forget keeping her at the table for dinner. Shauna had an almost drugged look sitting in my waiting room while she anticipated the next text message from her girlfriend Parker. Shauna's grades hadn't been great, and she was becoming a bit of a behavior problem at school, so she wasn't allowed to go over to her friends. Her mother, Lauren, had also denied her use of the cell phone and the computer. But Shauna's reaction to being cut off from her friends was so over the top she screamed, slammed doors, and started wrecking her room, that Lauren relented and gave her 20 minutes per day on the cell phone to make contact. But since she couldn't talk in private, Shauna resorted to text messaging. There is a biological reason for this behavior. Connecting through talking activates the pleasure centers in a girl's brain. Sharing secrets that have romantic and sexual implications activates those centers even more. We're not talking about a small amount of pleasure. This is huge. It's a major dopamine and oxytocin rush, which is the biggest, fattest neurological reward you can get outside of an orgasm. Dopamine is a neurochemical that stimulates the motivation and pleasure circuits in the brain. Estrogen at puberty increases dopamine and oxytocin production in girls. Oxytocin is a neurohormone that triggers and is triggered by intimacy. When estrogen is on the rise, a teen girl's brain is pushed to make even more oxytocin and to get even more reinforcement for social bonding. At mid-cycle, during peak estrogen production, the girl's dopamine and oxytocin level is likely at its highest, too. Not only her verbal output is at its maximum, but her urge for intimacy is also peaking. Intimacy releases more oxytocin, which reinforces the desire to connect, and connecting then brings a sense of pleasure and well-being. Both oxytocin and dopamine production are stimulated by ovarian estrogen at the onset of puberty, and for the rest of a woman's fertile life. This means that teen girls start getting even more pleasure from connecting and bonding, playing with each other's hair, gossiping, and shopping together than they did before puberty. It's the same kind of dopamine rush that coke or heroin addicts get when they do drugs. The combination of dopamine and oxytocin forms the biological basis of this drive for intimacy with its stress-reducing effect. If your teenage daughter is constantly talking on the phone or instant messaging with her friends, it's a girl thing, and it is helping her through stressful social changes. But you don't have to let her impulses dictate your family life. It took Lauren months of negotiation to get Shauna to sit through a family dinner without text messaging the world. Because the teen girl's brain is so well rewarded for communication, it's a tough habit for you to curb. Boys will be boys. We know that girls' estrogen levels climb at puberty and flip the switches in their brains to talk more, interact with peers more, think about boys more, worry about appearance more, stress out more, and emote more. They are driven by a desire for connection with other girls and with boys. Their dopamine and oxytocin rush from talking and connecting keeps them motivated to seek out these intimate connections. What they don't know is that this is their own special girl reality. Most boys don't share this intense desire for verbal connection, so attempts at verbal intimacy with their male contemporaries can be met with disappointing results. Girls who expect their boyfriends to chat with them the way their girlfriends do are in for a big surprise. Phone conversations can have painful lulls while she waits for him to say something. The best she can often hope for is that he is an attentive listener. She may not realize he's just bored and wants to get back to his video game. This difference may also be at the core of the major disappointment women feel all their lives with their marriage partners. He doesn't feel like being social, he doesn't crave long talks, but it's not his fault. When he is a teen, his testosterone levels begin soaring off the charts, and he disappears into adolescence, a phase used by one psychologist friend of mine to describe why her 15-year-old son never wants to talk to her anymore, takes refuge with his buddies in person or online gaming, and visibly cringes at the thought of a family dinner or outing. More than anything, he wants to be left alone in his room. Why do previously communicative boys become so taciturn and monosyllabic that they verge on autistic when they hit their teens? The testicular surges of testosterone marinate the boys' brains. Testosterone has been shown to decrease talking as well as interest in socializing, except when it involves sports or sexual pursuit. In fact, sexual pursuit and body parts become pretty much obsessions. When I was teaching the class of 15-year-olds, and it was time for the girls to ask their questions of boys, they wanted to know this. Do you prefer girls who have a little hair or a lot of hair? I thought they meant hairstyles, as in long hair versus a shorter cut. But I quickly realized that they were referring to the boys' preference for a lot or a little pubic hair. The boys resoundingly responded, no hair at all. So let's not mince words here. Young teen boys are often totally, single-mindedly consumed with sexual fantasies, girls' body parts, and the need to masturbation. Their reluctance to talk to adults comes out of magical thinking that grown-ups will read between their spoken lines and the look in their eyes, and know that the subject of sex has taken them over, mind, body, and soul. A teenage boy feels alone in and ashamed by his thoughts. Until his buddies start to joke and comment about girls' bodies, he thinks he is the only one consumed by such intense sexual fantasies and the constant fear that someone will notice the erections over which he seems to have no control. Compelling gustatory frenzies overwhelm him many times a day. He lives in fear of being found out. He's even more wary of verbal intimacy with girls, though he dreams of other kinds of intimacy with them day in and day out. For a few of the teen years, the teen girl brain and the teen boy brain have seriously different priorities when it comes to being close. Fear of conflict. Studies indicate that girls are motivated on a molecular and a neurological level to ease and even prevent social conflict. Maintaining the relationship at all costs is the female brain's goal. This may be especially true in the teenage female brain. I remember when my friend Shelley's oldest teenage daughter, Alana, had sleepovers nearly every night with her best friend, Phyllis, and on the nights they didn't, they talked on the phone until they had to go to sleep. They planned their outfits, talked about crushes on boys, and watched TV together over the phone. One day, Phyllis started badmouthing a less popular girl in class, who had been close friends with Alana in grade school. Her meanness made Alana uncomfortable and angry, but as she thought about confronting Phyllis, her mind and body were seared by a wave of anxiety. It became real to her that if she made even a hint of criticism to Phyllis's face, a fight that would spell the end of the friendship could result. Instead of risking the loss of her friendship with Phyllis, Alana decided to say nothing. This is a tape that plays in the brain of every woman at the thought of conflict, even a small disagreement. The female brain has a far more negative alert reaction to relationship conflict and rejection than does the male brain. Men often enjoy interpersonal conflict and competition. They even get a positive boost from it. In women, conflict is more likely to set in motion a cascade of negative chemical reactions, creating feelings of stress, upset, and fear. Just the thought that there might be a conflict will be read by the female brain as threatening the relationship, and bring with it the real concern that the next conversation she has with her friend will be their last. When a relationship is threatened or lost, the bottom drops out of the level of some of the female brain's neurochemicals, such as serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and the stress hormone cortisol takes over. A woman starts feeling anxious, bereft, and fearful of being rejected and left alone. Soon, she begins to jones for that good intimacy drug, oxytocin. She gets a feeling of closeness from the flood of oxytocin, which is boosted by social contact. But the minute that social contact is gone and the oxytocin and dopamine bottom out, she's in emotional trouble. As soon as a woman gets her feelings hurt, the hormonal shift sets off a fearful fantasy that the relationship will be over. This is why Alana decided to let Phyllis's mean comment about her old friend go, so she didn't have to risk the fight that might end the friendship. That's the fearful reality playing out in the female brain. This is why the breakup of a friendship, or just the thought of social isolation, is so stressful, especially among girl teens. Many brain circuits are geared to monitor closeness, and when closeness is threatened, the brain sounds the abandonment alarm loudly. Robert Josephs at the University of Texas has concluded that men's self-esteem derives more from their ability to maintain independence from others, while women's self-esteem is maintained, in part, by the ability to sustain intimate relationships with others. As a result, perhaps the greatest source of stress in the woman's or girl's brain can be the fear of losing intimate relationships and the lack of vital social support that might ensue. A girl's increasing stress and anxiety response at puberty may even be related to the formation of cliques and clubs. In fact, the formation of cliques may be the result of her stress response. Until recently, it was assumed that all human beings reacted to stress with the fight or flight response, a behavior described by W.B. Cannon in 1932. A person under stress or threat, the theory goes, will attack the source of that threat if there's any reasonable chance of winning. Otherwise, an individual will flee from a threatening situation. Fight or flight behavior, however, may not be characteristic of all humans. The UCLA psychology professor Shelley Taylor argues, in fact, that this is more likely to be the male response to threat and stress. Both sexes, to be sure, experience a powerful flood of neurochemicals and hormones when they come under acute stress, preparing them to meet the demands of an imminent threat. And that cascade can make males spring into action. Their aggression pathways are more direct than females. But fighting may not have been as evolutionarily adaptive for females as it was for males because females have less chance of physically defeating the larger males. And even if they are matched in strength with their opponents, turning to fight could mean leaving a helpless child alone and vulnerable. In the female brain, the circuit for aggression is more closely linked to cognitive, emotional, and verbal functions than is the male aggression pathway, which is more connected to brain areas for physical action. As for flight, females are generally less able to run when they're pregnant, nursing, or caring for a vulnerable child. Research has found that female mammals under stress rarely abandon their infants once they've formed maternal bonds. As a result, females appear to have some stress responses in addition to fight or flight that allow them to protect themselves and their dependent children. One such response may be reliance on social ties. Females in a bonded social group are more likely to come to one another's aid in a threatening or stressful situation. Members of a group can alert one another to conflict ahead of time, enabling them to move away from potential danger and continue safely tending dependent children. This pattern of behavior is termed tend and befriend, and it may be a particularly female strategy. Tending involves nurturant activities that promote safety and reduce distress for the self and offspring. Befriending is the creation and maintenance of social networks that may aid in this process. Remember, our modern female brain still has the ancient circuitry of our most successful foremothers. Early in mammalian evolution, females may well have formed social networks for support when threatened by males, as studies of some non-human primates indicate. In certain species of monkeys, for example, if a male is overly aggressive to a female, the other females in her group will come and face the male down, standing shoulder to shoulder, chasing him away with threatening cries. These female networks provide other types of protection and support, too. Many species of female primates will watch and care for one another's infants, share information about where to find food, and model maternal behavior for younger females. The UCLA anthropologist Joan Silk found a direct link between the degree of social connectedness of female baboons and their reproductive success. Her 16-year study showed that mothers who were the most socially connected had the greatest number of surviving infants, increasing their success at passing on their genes. Teen girls begin automatically building and practicing these friendship connections during their intimate talks in the school's bathrooms. Biologically, they are reaching optimal fertility. The Stone Age brains within them are flooded with neurochemicals telling them to connect with other women so that they can help protect the young. The primitive brain is saying, lose that bond, and both you and your offspring are toast. That's a powerful message. No wonder girls find it unbearably hard to cope with feelings of being left out. The brain marches to the beat of estrogen's drum. By the time Shauna was 10 years old, it was harder for Lauren to wake her up for school. Shauna started sleeping until noon on weekends. Lauren was sure this sleep pattern reflected Shauna's bad habits. She waited until the last minute to finish big projects, and she liked to stay up watching television. Shauna was beginning to feel depressed because her mom was calling her a lazy bum all the time, but Shauna couldn't see why. She was tired and wanted to sleep. Mother and daughter were locked in battle when I first saw them. In reality, the sleep cells in Shauna's brain had been reset at puberty by her ovarian estrogen surges. Estrogen affects practically everything that a teen girl experiences, including responsivity to light and the daily light-dark cycle. Estrogen receptors get activated in the brain's 24-hour clock cells in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. These clusters of cells orchestrate the daily, monthly, and annual rhythms of the body, such as those of hormones, body temperature, sleep, and mood. Estrogen even directly influences the brain cells that control breathing. It turns on the uniquely female sleep cycle as well as her growth hormone. By puberty, estrogen sets the timing of everything in the female brain. The female and male brains end up marching to different drummers. At around age 8 to 10 for girls, and a year or more later for boys, the brain's sleep clock begins to change its settings, leading to later bedtimes, later wake-up times, and more sleeping time overall. One study showed that at age 9, boys' and girls' brains had exactly the same brain waves during sleep. By age 12, girls had a 37% shift in their brain waves during sleep compared to boys. The scientists concluded that this indicated that girls' brains mature faster. The pruning of excess synapses in teen girls' brains starts earlier than it does in boys, thus moving them more quickly toward maturation of all their brain circuits. The female brain, on average, matures 2 to 3 years earlier than the male brain. A similar condition develops in boys' brains a few years later, but their sleep phase is pushed even an hour later than girls, by the age of 14. And this is just the beginning of being out of sync with the opposite sex. Females' tendency to go to sleep and wake up a bit earlier than do males is a difference that will last until after menopause. I saw Shauna and her mother many times over the years. Things became even rockier as Shauna got several years into the new rhythm that estrogen was establishing in her brain. It was day 26 of her cycle, and Shauna wasn't just screaming, she was shrieking. I am going to the beach tomorrow, and there's nothing you can do about it. Just try to stop me. No, Shauna, Lauren responded. You're not going with that group of kids. I told you I don't like the fact that they throw around so much money, and I'm pretty sure they're into drugs. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a stupid old prude who just doesn't have a life. You never had one. You were ugly and boring and a goody-two-shoes kid. You wouldn't know cool if it smacked you in the face. You can't stand it that I'm smarter than you and cooler than you, and you just want to keep me down. You're a fucking asshole. Lauren lost it. For the first time in her life, she slapped her daughter. The most obvious cycle controlled by estrogen is the menstrual cycle. The first day a young girl gets her period can be exciting and bewildering. It is a moment to celebrate, not in a new age, hippie sense, but because each month the menstrual cycle refreshes and recharges certain parts of a girl's brain. Estrogen acts as a fertilizer on cells, exciting her brain as well as making a girl more socially relaxed during the first 2 weeks. There's a 25% growth of connections in the hippocampus during weeks 1 and 2, the estrogen phase, and that makes the brain a little bit sharper. It functions a little better. You're clearer and you remember more. You think more quickly and more agilely. Then at ovulation, around day 14, progesterone starts squirting out of the ovaries and reversing the actions of estrogen, acting more like weed killer on those new connections in the hippocampus. During the last 2 weeks of the cycle, progesterone causes the brain to become first more sedated and gradually more irritable, less focused, and then a little slower. This may be one of the pivotal reasons for the change in stress sensitivity during the second half of the menstrual cycle. The extra connections built during the weeks that estrogen is on the rise are being reversed by progesterone in the last 2 weeks. In the last few days of the menstrual cycle, when progesterone collapses, this calming effect is abruptly withdrawn, leaving the brain momentarily upset, stressed, and irritable. This is where Shauna was when she screamed at her mother. Many women say they cry more easily and often feel out of sorts, stressed, aggressive, negative, hostile, or even hopeless and depressed right before their periods begin. In my clinic, we call them the crying over dog food commercials days, because even silly, sentimental things can trigger a tearful response during this short time. At first, this abrupt mood change takes girls like Shauna by surprise. Teens think that all they need to know about the menstrual cycle is to remember their Tampax and take Advil or Alev for the cramps on the day the blood flow starts. The idea that even when they're not bleeding, there could be brain effects from their cycling hormones takes some getting used to. By adulthood, they know how to handle it. Most women know that, in weeks 3 and 4, angry impulses fall under the 2-day rule. They'll wait 2 days and see if they still want to act on them. It took another few days for Shauna to realize she should not have spoken to her mother the way she did. And as her progesterone cycled out and her estrogen came back up, her irritability began to wane. Connections were once again sprouting in the hippocampus, and her brain gears were greased and working to full capacity. Pretty soon, she was surprising everyone with her wisecracks and smart alecky remarks, and they were getting her into a bit of trouble. The boys just couldn't keep up at times, and she was riding the edge with the girls. Brain performance in some females can fluctuate with the hormonal changes of the menstrual cycle. One of the most estrogen-sensitive parts of the brain, the hippocampus, is a major relay station for processing memories for words. This may be one biological reason behind women's increased verbal performance during the highest estrogen week, week 2, of their cycles. I often joke with my female grad students that they should take their oral exams on day 12 of their cycles, which is the peak of their verbal performance. Maybe the same should go for teen girls and the SATs, or for wives wanting to win a fight with their husbands. Why the teen girl brain freaks? Think about it, your brain has been pretty stable. You've had a steady flow or lack of hormones for your entire life. One day you're having tea parties with mommy, the next day you're calling her an asshole. And, as a teen girl, the last thing you want to do is create conflict. You used to feel like a nice girl, and now, out of nowhere, it's as though you can't rely on that personality anymore. Everything you thought you knew about yourself has suddenly come undone. It's a huge gash in a girl's self-esteem, but it's a pretty simple chemical reaction, even for an adult woman. It makes a difference if you know what's going on. The trouble for some women is caused by estrogen and progesterone withdrawal in the brain, which happens in the 4th week of the cycle. The hormones bottom out precipitously, and the brain begins yearning for their calming effects. When it doesn't get them, the brain becomes irritated, so irritated that it's on the same spectrum of discomfort as a seizure. This is true in a small percentage of women, to be sure, but it's not fun. So stress and emotional reactivity can increase dramatically the few days before the onset of bleeding. At the National Institute of Mental Health in Bethesda, Maryland, David Rubino and colleagues have been studying menstrual mood changes. They've now found direct evidence that the hormone fluctuations during the menstrual cycle increase brain circuit excitability, as measured by the startle reflex, which most of us think of as being jumpy. It is also related to the stress response. This helps explain why women often feel more irritable during maximal hormone withdrawal. Although 80% of women are only mildly affected by these monthly hormone changes, about 10% say they get extremely edgy and easily upset. Females whose ovaries make the most estrogen and progesterone are more resistant to stress because they have more serotonin. a chemical that makes you feel at ease cells in their brains. Those women with the least estrogen and progesterone are more sensitive to stress and have fewer serotonin brain cells. For these most stress-sensitive individuals, the final days before their periods start can be hell on earth. Hostility, hopeless feelings of depression, plans for suicide, panic attacks, fear, and uncontrollable bouts of crying and rage can plague them. Hormone and serotonin changes can result in a malfunction in the brain's seat of judgment, the prefrontal cortex, and dramatic, uncontrolled emotions can push through more easily from the primitive parts of the brain. Shauna was in this category. During the week or two before her period, she was constantly in trouble for talking out of turn and being disruptive in class. She was obnoxious and aggressive one minute, bursting into tears the next. Pretty soon, her moods turned wild, and she began to intimidate her parents, peers, and teachers. Repeated meetings with the principal and school counselor did nothing to curb her outbursts, and when her parents finally sent her to a pediatrician, he too was baffled by her extreme behavior. It was a female teacher who noticed that Shauna's behavior was at its worst during 2 weeks of each month. The rest of the time, she was like her old self, or more like a typical teen, sometimes moody and oversensitive, but mostly cooperative. On a hunch, the teacher called me at the clinic to suggest that Shauna had bad PMS. Shauna's mood and personality swings, while extreme, were no surprise. In 20 years of practice in psychiatry and women's health, I've seen hundreds of girls and women with similar problems. Most blame themselves for their flare-ups of bad behavior. Some have been in psychotherapy for years trying to get to the bottom of their recurring sadness or anger. Many have been regularly accused of substance abuse, bad attitudes, and bad intentions. Most of these assumptions are unjust, and all of them completely miss the point. These adolescent girls and adult women have regular, dramatic shifts in their moods and behavior because, in fact, the very structure of their brains is changing, from day to day and from week to week. The medical name for an extreme emotional reaction during the weeks before the period, triggered by ovarian estrogen and progesterone hormones, is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, PMDD. Women who have committed crimes while suffering from PMDD have successfully used it as a defense in France and England by establishing temporary insanity. Other common conditions, such as menstrual migraine, are also caused by increased brain circuit excitability and decreased calming right before the period starts. Researchers at the National Institute of Mental Health found that the emotion and mood changes these women experience during the menstrual cycle disappear when the ovaries are blocked from producing fluctuating hormones. It may be, they conclude, that women with PMDD are in some sense allergic or hypersensitive to fluctuations in estrogen and progesterone during the cycle. 50 years ago, one successful treatment for PMDD was removing the ovaries surgically. At the time, this was the only way to remove the hormone fluctuation. Instead of removing Shauna's ovaries, I gave her a hormone to take every day, the continuous birth control pill, to keep her estrogen and progesterone at moderately high but constant levels, and prevent her ovaries from sending out the big fluctuations of hormones that were upsetting her brain. With her estrogen and progesterone at constant levels, her brain was kept calmer and her serotonin levels stabilized. For some girls, I add an antidepressant, a so-called SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which can further stabilize and improve the brain's serotonin level, in other words, improve one's mood and sense of well-being. The following month, her teacher called me to report that Shauna was back to her good old self again, cheerful and getting good grades. Risk-taking and aggression in teen girls. The day Shauna screamed that she wanted to go to the beach, Lauren had been concerned about her daughter's boyfriend, Jeff. Jeff was from a very wealthy and permissive family, and at 15, Shauna had already had sex with him. Jeff's parents allowed them to do it in their house, a fact Shauna had kept hidden from her parents until she had a pregnancy scare. Since Jeff wasn't going away, Lauren decided it was best to get to know him. And the more she did, the more she liked him. Jeff was lavishing Shauna with gifts, something Lauren wasn't thrilled about, but she didn't want to hurt his feelings, and Shauna was happy when he was around. She made deals with her parents. "Come on, Mom, I'm really stressed out, and if he comes over for an hour, I'll feel better. I promise to finish my work after he leaves." She often snuck him back in, and the two were thick as thieves. Shauna had been seeing Jeff for 8 months. The day after she told her mom how much she loved him, Shauna showed up at home after school with Mike, a boy she had sworn was just a friend. When Lauren went up to check on them, the door was closed. When she opened it, they were, as she put it, sucking face. Since she had allowed Shauna to be sexually involved with Jeff, Lauren didn't know what to do. It was clear that Shauna's impulses were getting out of control. A girl's emotional centers become highly responsive at puberty. Her brain's emotion and impulse control system, the prefrontal cortex, has sprouted many more cells by the age of 12, but the connections are still thin and immature. As a result, a teenage girl's mood changes, resulting in part from the increased emotional impulses blasting in from the amygdala, are more rapid and dramatic. Her prefrontal cortex is like an old dial-up modem receiving signals from broadband. It can't handle the increased traffic from the amygdala, and it often becomes overwhelmed. Teenagers, therefore, often cling to an idea and run with it, not stopping to consider the consequences. They become resentful of any authority that wants to head off their impulses. My patient Joan, for example, remained in upstate New York the summer after she graduated from boarding school there. An honors student, she had been involved with a local guy who didn't graduate high school, had been in juvenile detention, and at age 16 had fathered a child. She ran around with him all summer, and when it came time to leave for college, she thought twice about it. She wanted to stay with him. When her parents threatened to come up, take the car, and drag her off to college, she ran away with her boyfriend. She did come to her senses and go to college, but it was a long time before she spoke civilly to her parents again. It's tough for the teen brain to come up with good judgment in these situations. Remember Romeo and Juliet? If only the two lovers had known that their brain circuits were under major reconstruction. If only they'd known that their sex hormones were causing brain cells to grow and sprout extensions, and that it would take several years to form structurally sound connections once those extensions were plugged into the correct outlets in mature prefrontal cortexes. Juliet's brain would have matured 2 to 3 years earlier than Romeo's, though, so she may have come to her senses sooner than he. These unfinished, unmyelinated extension cords, most prominent in the connections from the emotion center of the amygdala to the emotional control center of the prefrontal cortex, need to be coated with a substance called myelin that allows for fast conduction before they can function reliably under stress. This may not happen until the late teens or early adult years. Without the fast connection to the prefrontal cortex, big downloads of emotional impulses often result in immediate, raw behaviors and circuit overload. When it is upset by an unwanted parental restriction such as, "We know you were drinking at the party, and you're too involved with boys, and your grades are going down, so you are grounded," the teen girl amygdala may not respond with much more than "I hate you." But watch out for the subtle signs of rebellion that can ensue. She'll find another way to undermine you. Karen, a former patient of mine who is now a tenured professor of biochemistry, told me a story that illustrates this teen reality. She grew up in a small town in Washington state, where many students dropped out of high school to work for the lumber companies in the area. Her girlfriends got jobs as cooks or secretaries in the lumber camps, or got married and almost immediately became pregnant. By the time she was a sophomore in high school, Karen was desperate to get away from home. She was determined to go to college, a radical idea in a town where only the teachers, the doctor, and the librarian were college graduates. Her parents accused her of living in a fantasy world. They didn't have the money to send her, and what did she think she could do with a college degree when she would likely get knocked up by the time she was 20? Their scorn made Karen even more determined to find a way out. At 18, she wanted to stay in school and graduate. But she was old enough to get a job as a go-go dancer in one of the local bars that serviced the lumberjacks who came into town to spend their paychecks. She moved in with her boyfriend and worked nights at the bar. Too young to go topless, she still managed to earn $20 tips, which the customers would stick in her G-string. Not exactly the typical line of work for a future biochemistry professor. But Karen earned enough money to pay for her first semester at college, and after that, her grades were rewarded with a full scholarship. Now that Karen is herself the mother of 3 teenagers, 2 girls and a boy, she tries to imagine how she would react if her 18-year-old daughter announced that she had just gotten herself a job as a pole dancer in a bar. She herself had avoided any dangerous incidents, but her go-go gig could have turned out otherwise. Changing hormonal conditions in girls' brains through the menstrual cycle add even more volatility to the mix. If estrogen and progesterone simply increased during the teen years and remained at that new, higher level, the female brain would permanently readjust. But as we have seen, these hormones come in waves. Given the fact that the teen brain is undergoing major changes, especially in areas that are particularly sensitive to shifts in hormones, puberty can be an outrageously impulsive time for many girls. Under no stress on a good week of the menstrual cycle, the teen girl's prefrontal cortex may function normally. At those times, she may have good judgment and appropriate behavior. But some stress, like a disappointment or a bad grade, on a PMS day may derail the prefrontal cortex, causing an exaggerated emotional response and out-of-control behavior, such as yelling and slamming doors, what at my house we call a meltdown. Testosterone surges in teen boys may have similar brain effects, but these have not been studied yet. Hormone surges at this age can make a mild stress or a seemingly small event feel like a catastrophe. Calming down the fired-up teen girl amygdala can prove difficult. Many girls turn to drugs, alcohol, and food. Either they'll stop eating or they'll binge when they're under stress. As a parent of teens, you have the job of ignoring much of what they say. Don't take any impulsive or emotional tirades seriously. Stay calm. Teens state their intentions and feel them with such passion that you can be persuaded in spite of yourself. Just remember, your teen daughter's impulse control circuits can't handle the input. Like it or not, you must provide the control while her brain cannot. Even though Joan hated her parents for threatening to come and take her car away, they did the right thing, she told me years later. It was their job to exercise the good judgment that she lacked at that time. Depression. It wasn't long before even Mike began to realize Shauna's impulses were out of control. If she could turn on a dime about Jeff, she could change her mind about him, too, and he decided to break it off. A few of Shauna's friends were also mad at her over how she treated Jeff, and she was becoming isolated. Up until then, Shauna had been doing well. She was writing for the school newspaper, was becoming serious about sculpting, and was going to have a good pick of colleges. Her teachers loved her creativity and spark. But when Mike broke it off, everything changed. Shauna lost a ton of weight. She stopped doing well in school. She let the school paper down by not writing stories that were assigned. She couldn't concentrate or do her homework, couldn't sleep, was obsessed with her weight and appearance, and couldn't get her brain to stop thinking about him. I could see a few scratches on her arm and realized she was cutting. I was quite alarmed, since this is the period when the female-to-male ratio for depression doubles. Boys and girls have the same risk of depression before the hormones of puberty, but by age 15, girls are twice as likely to suffer from depression. Genetics may also play a role in female depression. In certain families with high depression rates, for example, researchers have found a mutation in a gene called CREB1 that puts teenage females, but not males, at higher risk for clinical depression. Shauna's mother and grandmother had had serious depressions in their teens, and a female cousin had committed suicide. These facts put her at serious risk. Shauna had a true clinical depression. I started her on an antidepressant, stayed in close contact, and did weekly cognitive therapy. Within 4 to 6 weeks, she was able to concentrate again, take her final exams, and stop obsessing over both Mike and her weight. The biology of mean girls. Hormonal surges can turn nice girls mean at the drop of an egg, and so can sexual competition, which is strong and pivotal among teenage girls. This competition, however, plays out with a different set of rules than does that among teen boys. Girls are driven to gather in cliques, but there is another side in which these cliques are at war. Teen girls, we know, can be devastatingly mean. When females are competing with other females, they often use more subtle tools, such as spreading rumors to undermine a rival. This way, they can cover their tracks. I wasn't trying to be mean. I'm sorry. Such tactics lessen the risk of destroying the bond that the teen girl brain sees as essential to survival. But also essential to survival is sexual competition. I can remember when I was in 7th grade, there was one girl who was beautiful, and the other girls were very jealous because she got so much attention from the boys. She was also shy, so others assumed she was a snob. One day, the not as pretty girl who sat directly behind her in a class took a wad of bubble gum out of her mouth and stuck it in the pretty girl's hair. Unknowingly, the pretty girl began to twist the gum into such a mess that the only way to get it out was to cut off her seductive locks. The queen of mean, who put the gum in this girl's hair, felt triumphant. Her biological imperative to compete for sexual attractiveness had a momentary victory. The hormones usually associated with aggression in both males and females are androgens. They begin to rise early in puberty and continue until they peak at age 19 in females and 21 in males. The three main androgens that women make are testosterone, DHEA, and androstenedione. In a study at the University of Utah, the most in-your-face aggressive teenage girls were found to have high levels of the androgen androstenedione. Acne is a good clue that your teen's androgen levels are high. Girls with high levels of testosterone and DHEA also tend to have sexual intercourse earlier. By the time I saw Shauna at age 15, she not only had acne and fully developed breasts, but had been having sex for the past year. Aggressive impulses can fluctuate with the hormones of the menstrual cycle. During some weeks of the cycle, the teen girl will be more interested in social connection. During other weeks, she'll be more interested in power over boys and other girls. This association implies that the higher amounts of androgens made by the ovaries during weeks 2 and 3 increase aggression levels in women and teens. Less empathy, social connection, and affiliation have been associated with higher androgen levels in both sexes. We can't know for sure, but Shauna's higher androgen levels on certain weeks of her cycle may have been triggering her aggressive outbursts. Not only is aggression reduced when androgen levels are low, but sex drive is decreased, too. Teens taking oral contraceptives have reduced aggression and sex drive because the contraceptive suppresses the ovaries, so they make less androgen. Although both men and women make testosterone, men make more than 10 times as much, meaning that their sex drive is much greater than women's. Scientists know that it is probably not just androgens that increase aggressive spirit and ambition in women, but estrogen, too. In the same study at the University of Utah, women who were the most outspoken and had the highest self-regard also had the highest levels of estrogen, testosterone, and androstenedione. They also ranked themselves above how their peers ranked them. And these young women were routinely rated by others as the most boastful. Of course, a hormone alone does not cause a behavior. Hormones merely raise the likelihood that under certain circumstances a behavior will occur. And just as there is no one seat of aggression in the brain, there is no one hormone of aggression. But achieving success and attaining power in the world requires some aggression for both sexes. These hormones change teens' reality and perceptions of themselves as sexual, assertive, and independent beings in the world. During the teen years, a girl's brain circuits go through massive growth and pruning. It's as if she is given a whole new set of extension cords and needs to figure out which one to plug into which outlet. The full power of her female brain circuits can now start to be manifested. And where will they push her? Right into the arms of a man. Love and trust. Melissa, a brassy San Francisco film producer, really wanted to fall in love. Her career was finally chugging along at a steady pace, and at age 32, she was ready to move into the next phase of her life. She now wanted a family and the continuity of a relationship with a man who would stick by her for more than a few sexually charged months. The only problem was that she couldn't seem to connect with the right one. She would go on countless dates through setups, or with men she met on the internet, but none was touching off the flurry of butterflies in her stomach or that intense, irrational need to be around him all the time. One night, her best friend, Leslie, called and asked Melissa to go salsa dancing, but Melissa wasn't in the mood. She wanted to stay home, relax, and watch TV, but Leslie was relentless, so Melissa acquiesced. She tousled her curly hair to look sexy, put on a swirly skirt, her new red suede heels, and sting red lipstick, which made her mouth pop out. She grabbed a taxi over to the dance club. Leslie was already inside drinking a margarita when Melissa arrived. As they were getting loose to hit the dance floor, Melissa saw a tall, handsome man with a sculpted face, olive skin, and a shock of nearly black hair across the room. "Wow, he's gorgeous," she said. She turned back to Leslie and whispered for her to glance over at the man, but it was too late. He was already walking toward them. Melissa was locked in gaze with this stranger. A wave of energy shot up her back. It was the feeling she hadn't experienced in all the months of her bad dates. There was something vaguely familiar about him. Who is that? She whispered under her breath to Leslie, as her brain's cortex scanned her memory banks. No match was found, but all her attention circuits were now on mating alert status. Is he here alone or with someone? She wondered. She looked around for the one of the gorgeous women who always seemed to be attached to these perfect-looking guys, but saw no one. And he was still walking toward her. The closer he got, the more unfocused Melissa became on her friend's story. She grabbed her drink tightly. Her eyes and attention were riveted on him, taking in every detail: his leather Armani shoes, his sexy black cords, and no wedding ring on his left finger. Everything else dropped into the background as her brain honed to make contact. She felt like she was falling in love. The mating impulse had taken over. "Hi, I'm Rob," he said, leaning against the bar nervously. His voice was pure velvet. "Have we met before?" Melissa was unable to hear his words. She could only bask in the feel of him, his earthy smell, and his devilish green eyes. The dance of romance had begun, and its choreographer was not her friend or a matchmaker. It was the biology of Melissa's brain. We know that the symmetry of physiques and faces that entrance us, the moves that seduce us, and the heart-pounding passion of attraction are all hardwired into our brain's love drive by evolution. Short-hand, long-term chemistry between two people may seem accidental, but the reality is that our brains are pre-programmed to know better. They subtly but firmly steer us toward partners who can boost our odds in the sweepstakes of human reproduction. Melissa's brain is beginning to imprint Rob. Her hormones are surging. As he tells her that he is a marketing consultant who lives in a loft in Potrero Hill and musters up the nerve to ask her to dance, her brain, faster than a supercomputer, calculates the qualities that might put him in the running as a mating partner. Already some green light is flashing that he's a good one, and wham, hot, knee-buckling waves of attraction and desire are flooding her body with a heady rush of dopamine, sparking euphoria and excitement. Her brain has also ordered her a shot of testosterone, the hormone that stokes sexual desire. As Rob speaks, he is also sizing up Melissa at a closer view. If his calculations come out positive, he'll get a neurochemical jolt, too, prodding him to try to hook up with her. With their love circuits mutually revved up, the two move onto the dance floor and spend the next few hours locked in sweaty salsa rhythms. At 2:00 a.m., the music slows down and the club begins to empty. Leslie has gone home hours earlier. Standing on the corner, Melissa says that she has to go and flirtatiously turns on her high heels. "Wait," Rob says, "I don't have your number." "I want to see you again." "Google me and you'll find me," she replies, smiling and jumping into a cab. Now the chase begins. For men and women, the initial calculations about romance are unconscious, and they're very different. In short-term couplings, for example, men are chasers and women are choosers. That's not sex stereotyping. It's our inheritance from ancestors who learned, over millions of years, how to propagate their genes. As Darwin noted, males of all species are made for wooing females, and females typically choose among their suitors. This is the brain architecture of love, engineered by the reproductive winners in evolution. Even the shapes, faces, smells, and ages of the mates we choose are influenced by patterns set millennia ago. The truth is, we're much more predictable than we think. Over the course of our evolution as a species, our brains have learned how to spot the healthiest mates, those most likely to give us children, and those whose resources and commitment can help our offspring survive. The lessons that early men and women learned are deeply encoded in our modern brains as neurological love circuits. They are present from the moment we're born and activated at puberty by fast-acting cocktails of neurochemicals. It's an elegant system. Our brains size up a potential partner, and if he fits our ancestral wish list, we get a jolt of chemicals that dizzy us with a rush of laser-focused attraction. Call it love or infatuation. It's the first step down an ancient pair bonding